Hey everyone, it's Amber. A quick heads up. This episode contains a discussion of medical trauma and complex PTSD, so please take care when listening. Check the show notes for a description and timestamps in case you want to skip certain sections. Thanks for listening. Now, on to the show. I'm Amber Tresca, and this is about IBD. I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis as a teen and had J-pouch surgery 10 years later. Today, I help people with Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis understand their disease and feel seen. About IBD is real talk on symptoms, treatment, and life with IBD. Straight from patients, caregivers, and experts. You'll learn, feel less alone, and have a laugh along the way. This episode is sponsored by Connecting to Cure. Connecting to Cure is a nonprofit whose mission is to accelerate research, amplify awareness of Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, and connect and support the inflammatory bowel disease community. You can find them at connectingtocure.org, and I am so grateful for their support. Daniel Leighton is a painter, augmented reality artist, filmmaker, and technologist who began programming at the age of 11. Born with Crohn's disease, he faced mortality from a young age, leading him on a lifelong journey of emotional and artistic exploration. A central aim of Daniel's art is to build a visual vocabulary of emotions, a way to externalize internal experiences that can be difficult to articulate. For Daniel, each piece begins in the body. His art is not just something to look at, but something to feel. An invitation to slow down, drop in, and inhabit a deeper sense of presence. Daniel, welcome to About IBD.
Thank you, Amber. Great to be here.
I'm so excited to speak with you. Our topic is how art can be an outlet for our thoughts, feelings, and emotions about living with IBD, and you have been doing that for quite some time with exceptional success. But I want to start first with learning about your IBD journey. You were diagnosed at a young age. Can you start there with telling us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I was diagnosed originally I was actually diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, later to be re-diagnosed with Crohn's when I was 20. But when I was 5 years old is when I was diagnosed. They said, I must have had it since birth, given the issues I had had up to that point. I was at least the third generation on my mom's side to have a form of IBD. So I think that went into that as well. And then I was in the hospital. I had a really traumatic diagnosis. Probably around 9 or 10, I started getting much, much worse. And, I was not growing. And then when I was 11, I had the first of what would be 6 major surgeries. The first, it was supposed to be originally just 2 parts, like a J pouch. So I had 4 surgeries from 11 to 15, I believe. And then that one was like, okay, I'm going to have an ileostomy, but I'll still keep the structure intact of the J pouch in case I wanted to go back. And then the last surgery, there was another one in between. And then the last one when I was 21 was me just saying, forget it, I want it out and be done with this. I still have a lot of symptoms and things that I deal with on a daily basis, but I've been mostly disease-free. Haven't had any surgeries in, 30 plus years. Have had an ileostomy, basically like 40 something years. And now I'm not on any medication because I've been in clinical remission for about 6 years. I like to say I try to create the circumstances that will best support a healthy outcome, as much as I can. I think that's kind of the best, I can do with an incurable chronic illness, right?
I would say that, yeah, that you've done really well, especially given such a rough start. I want to say that the J pouches started to be experimented with somewhere in the mid to late 70s. So early 80s, yeah, that was early days. They maybe didn't have things quite nailed down yet, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So,
I was told at the time that I was the youngest person to ever have that. I don't know. I think there are different flavors of it from different surgeons around the country, but at least the one that I had, I was the youngest at the time to have it. It was new.
yeah, I don't doubt it at all. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing those experiences. I know how difficult it is at times to explain these things and bring them up, but also that has led you to art to be an outlet for some of these things. So how did that start for you?
Well, I was always an artist, but I didn't know it. Only, now I look back and I see that I was always having these visual ways of understanding. So I'd have imagery around, like I'd be in therapy, for example, trying to explain how I felt, but I'd be referencing an image that I had in my head and trying to describe it to the therapist as a way of saying, this is how I feel, you know? And but this whole time, like early on, I had decided I couldn't draw, and so I went to filmmaking. And I admire painters because it was so immediate, but for me, I thought, oh, that's not even an option. And when I was around 39, I just started drawing, just not expecting anything, but just as a way to get some of these ideas down. Um, I had previously, my wife's a lifelong artist, so I was asking her to draw things, but she, but again, it's like I'm describing an image that nobody can see. So, so, but she would try, she would try, but then finally she's like, because I'd be like, no, 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 it's not like that. It's not like that. And I'd realize also the things I'm trying to describe aren't really possible to to convey. So she just said, you do it. And I was like, okay, I can't do it, but I'll just start doing stick figures. And so I started doing that, and it felt good to, just to get those ideas down at least. I remember drawing in those early days, like also just how my stomach felt, or trying to depict like what I thought maybe was going on, or what I pictured going on in there, and found that it felt really good. And then I started actually liking what I was drawing, which was shocking to me. And even I remember the first painting I sold ended up being the first painting I sold. I did it, and I showed it to my wife, and I said, is this a copy of something, or have you seen this
Oh,
before?
yeah.
And because I was like, this looks so familiar to me. And she said, it's familiar because you've been seeing it in your head your whole life, and having an iPad to do it with when especially around that time, I was having a pretty prolonged flare up, which really looking back may have been not as much a disease based flare up, but a trauma based flare
Oh,
up.
yeah.
Or, when I really think about it. Um, so it was great having that, being able to be in bed, have a whole like art studio on my lap, able to create right there. It's been an amazing journey, and it always makes me think that if I could be an artist, then anything is possible. Because just a year prior to that, I would have said, "There's no way."
I love that your wife, I can just imagine that she was like, oh my gosh, do it yourself. As a wife,
Yeah,
I feel
yeah.
that deeply. Just do it yourself.
Uh-huh. Yeah. she also, when we first kissed, she pushed me away and she said, "I can't be with an artist." And I was like, "What? What are you talking about? I'm not an artist. I'm a business, I
Yeah,
had a web development company at the time." She saw it, I didn't. She helped me realize I was.
I love
Yeah.
that. That's really we could do a whole other show about your relationship. But
Yeah.
but the central theme of what you're telling us about is how art has helped you through some of the trauma that you've experienced living with IBD. And so I'm wondering if you can expand upon that and talk to me more about how that can help people like anyone who lives with IBD or some other chronic illness. How can art help them cope and process their emotions and offer some stress relief, maybe?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, one of the things that was so powerful for me in being able to paint these traumatic experiences I went through, to have like an active way to process it, like to be able to be doing something and kind of my process is such that I'm taking what I'm feeling in my body and I'm trying to move it through my body and on, out of my, like up through my body, out my arm, into my hand, onto the canvas. Prior to that, I was just trying to tell people and explain this thing that happened, and it didn't give me the movement I needed, and the words just always felt like they fell, way too short. Being able to experience that, like there's one painting in particular I'm thinking of as I'm talking about this, but it's true of many of the paintings I've done. It was like 8 hours straight, no eating, maybe a few bathroom breaks, of course. But being able to spend time with it, move it, channel that energy in a creative and positive way, um, allowed me to feel safer, I think, at some level, um, and process it in just a completely different way than I had been able to previously. And as far as how people with IBD can use it as a way to express, I would say, just like I did. I mean, just start. Take away the judgment, take away the expectation, and just start moving. And again, visualize if your stomach is hurting, picture the feeling. Maybe what's the shape of that? Just try to you can even close your eyes and try to feel it moving out of your body and onto the surface. It doesn't matter what it looks like. It's really the process of doing it that is the healing part. And if it does look like something that means something to you, you're the only one that matters, by the way. You don't have to show this to anybody. Think of it as a diary or as a journal. If it does reflect something back to you that resonates, the feeling, it's like no other feeling to create something that makes you feel validation that often we need to get from some outside source. To be able to get that through your own creative process is incredibly powerful. Even though if it doesn't have to be anything special, it just has to mean something to you. That's the key thing. you know and really, again, the end result doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's just, you can throw it away, you can burn it, whatever. Be safe, but
I think too, you have come through this process yourself from saying I'm not an artist all the way through to being a successful artist, quite frankly. So there's that intimidation factor. So
yeah.
You've already given a couple of points that just start anywhere. And it doesn't have to be something that you show in a gallery. It just needs to be something that is taking you through the process. How can people think about, though, that they're thinking, I'm not an artist, I feel intimidated by even starting. Maybe they don't know what medium to use. Do you have any other advice to help people just get over that hump?
Yeah, sure. I would use whatever's available. If it's a pen and paper, do that. That's what I started with, was like pencil and paper. Then I got some colored pencils. Then I got some markers. Then I was looking through some of my the earliest stuff I did. Some of it's just scribbling, moving my hand furiously against the paper, because even that movement feels better than just feeling stuck, feeling not well and not able to do anything about it. Even with like my computer programming work I've done, there's something special about being able to like make something happen. So even if it's just a mark that you make once a day, whatever, it's like anything feels good. And movement versus, being static or feeling stuck, which, I will often say that everyone who has a chronic illness has PTSD, and almost certainly has CPTSD, complex PTSD, because the very nature of a chronic illness is such that we have these recurring, if not actual incidents, then certainly the awareness and the fear that it can happen at any moment, right? So we will get into freeze. We get fight, flight, freeze. And really, for any one of those states, um, if you're in flight, slowing down is great. That's one thing that I would say is go really slow.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let yourself feel it and notice in your body what's happening. When I move slowly, what I do is I press really hard against the surface I'm drawing on or painting on, because I like to feel the connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I move real slowly, and just even that slow movement is really powerful. You don't even have to you could do slow movement and have it be powerful without even involving drawing or anything. But if you involve drawing too, it sort of gives you a focus point, and it becomes like a meditation. And when you're in freeze, especially, that can be really, really helpful. And again, I think really any of those three states, it'll help with.
Connecting to Cure is dedicated to connecting and supporting the IBD community, accelerating research, and amplifying awareness of Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. Through their Connections programs, Connecting to Cure offers resources like peer mentorship, gut-friendly workouts, and support groups for IBD patients, caregivers, and family members. They also provide assistance to underserved communities, helping families cover the costs associated with their children's medical care and making it possible for kids with IBD to attend summer camp. Connecting to Cure funds cutting-edge research at leading institutions like Cedars-Sinai, Mount Sinai, and the Mayo Clinic. To learn more or to get involved, visit connectingtocure.org. Daniel, I want to ask you about the evolution of your artwork over time, because I think this is a great example for people who aren't sure how or why they want to use art as an outlet. So I wonder if you would start by taking us through a few of your drawings.
Okay, yeah. So the boulder. So this one was basically, I had, again, because of PTSD, I remember being like when I would be outside, if I was out, laying out by a pool or we went to the beach or whatever, and if I'd close my eyes, I'd immediately see a boulder just falling out of thin air toward my stomach. So this was one of my early drawings, just trying to capture that concept. And and then I think the fact that the figure is, they have no eyes, arms, legs. It's just the outline of a figure. And it's also like, it's really just like a few squiggly lines and a bunch of, that the boulder, bunch of extra drawing inside a little shape. That was actually one of my early things that I was encouraged about, like that my wife noted and told me. And because I would always be like, really, this is good. you know um but I mean, I liked it because it conveyed what I was trying to convey to whatever degree, and but she was like, it's amazing that you can capture something with so few lines, so it doesn't have to be this really elaborate kind of thing. It can be really simple. And back to the sort of tips, another thing you could do is you could draw your own pain chart, right? I do a lot of
Yeah.
faces. Yeah, and they have those like ridiculous faces and all that on the pain chart. So you could do your own, and you could say, this is how I feel, and you could put a number. Or it doesn't have to be any particular thing. And in fact, sometimes I tell people, like, when I was a kid and I mentioned that I draw, I decided my drawing wasn't good because it didn't look like everyone else. Well, when you get older and you draw and it doesn't look like everyone else, it makes you stand out. So it's sort of like the opposite effect. Like, my style is identifiable. And one more thing about the intimidation part I want to say is that it's important to do things that do intimidate you, as long that, especially with things like this that won't hurt you. One of the last times I was in the hospital, I decided, you know what? I'm going to reset a lot of things in my life. I reset my diet. I started exercising. I took ballroom dancing. I was usually only the clown dancer who would make the wedding video highlights. Um, but that was just a way, it's like, I mean, I was having fun and that was a way to have fun.
Yeah.
But it was also like, I did have an urge to do that. And so I took ballroom dancing lessons, in part because I thought, oh, I could never do that. And I realized I was stuck in a rut of doing too many things that I was used to and good at already, because I had done them so many times. If you're intimidated, there's another reason to start and just try it. And again, there's no downside, right? I know another one you wanted to talk about was choked up. I'm trying to convey here the feeling of like my throat closing. Usually that's accompanied for me with by nausea. You'll see the eyes have this kind of spirals in them. And that's about like the foggy brain, or the pain or the discomfort. Nothing, nothing fancy, just a few lines, some circles. And often the biggest guide for me is, does it feel good? Does something in my body open up when I'm drawing this? And if I do spirals, does that do I suddenly feel like, oh, this place in my belly that's been stuck finally just gurgled and made it some movement? There's, to me, that's like, okay, I've hit the jackpot. I'm going to keep doing this, or find the next thing. It may be something else after the first, that may get one side, and now you're going to do some other kind of line, and that's going to open up another part. But any kind of opening or any kind of better feeling that you feel in your body when you're drawing, use that as your guide. And then hope beyond the mountain. This was about my sixth surgery. And really, it wasn't about the surgery itself, but really the process of getting to the place where I was able to recognize that I needed it. I mentioned earlier that after a certain point of them trying to fix my J pouch, they left it in, gave me an ileostomy, but left it in with the option of going back later. But I was having issues. I could tell it was inflamed. It was wearing me down. There were all sorts of other issues. And I went on like that for a while because the thought of having another surgery was terrifying to me and just not something I could handle. And I was a teenager. I'd already lost so many of my teenage years to this stuff. I think I really just blocked it out. And then there was this one night where I'm getting ready to go out with my friends, and I'm, doing my hair and looking in the mirror. And I just sort of like suddenly realized I need to have another surgery. And I realized, I've known this for years, but I didn't allow myself to, acknowledge it. But at that moment, it was like, I could see just beyond this mountain, this previously unconquerable mountain. I could see just beyond that. I could see, you know what, there's an after to this, and it's better than the before. But I have to go through this journey to get there. And so that was, yeah, that was another one that's not many lines, simple drawing, but trying to convey that feeling, because it was, these are things I was always trying to like tell people about and explain what I felt, to explain what I learned in the process of going through these things. Because there you see, that's part of how the mind works. That's why when we dissociate, um, that actually is a valuable thing that we need to do to take care of ourselves. So that's an important thing too, is that we can't get down on ourselves for dissociating, and we can't get down on ourselves for not moving quickly enough. And sometimes you need to push yourself, no doubt, but you also have to have compassion. So it's a balance there.
Like you said, not elaborate, simple, but powerful, because they absolutely convey, when you see these pieces, you know exactly, maybe not your specific circumstances, but you can see that it is hope on the other side of a hill, of a mountain that you need to get over, and hope is on the other side, and it's very clear.
And if someone can, it doesn't have to be, a lot of these obviously are based in my story, my history, and all that. Just to what you said, it doesn't have to be my story. If you can interpret it in a way that matches your story and makes you feel validated, or um, any better in any way, then go for it. That's great. That makes me thrilled. That's thrilling to me.
That's a perfect segue into what I want to ask you about next, because there's one of your paintings in particular is that you were so generous as to share many pieces of your art with me, and I was looking through them. And the one that stood out to me in particular, because I think a lot of people with IBD would see this and would relate to it. And it's titled First Surgery. So I was hoping that you would tell me a little bit about this piece and what inspired it.
Yeah, I even remember where I was when I was drawing this. We were traveling, and I was drawing a lot of it on the plane, and it was, well, okay. So I was 11 years old. I know I think I was like 50 pounds underweight, something like
Oh my
crazy.
gosh. Yeah.
I was like really, really weak, fragile, and I was in ICU after the surgery for a few days. And so there's, in the painting, you see the skin looks very kind of thin, and there's a lot of fragility. There's kind of like this broken heart.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think like when I think of that, I think of seeing my belly for the first time, seeing my stoma for the first time,
Yeah.
which they told me it was, they told me everything that was going to happen, but
It's not the same.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the first anything I'd had. I had this little 11-year-old body, and now I have this massive scar. And it was back far enough where the scars, there was no laparoscopy or any of that. There was staples, there was betadine covered on my stomach, and then my stoma, which just looked like, a piece of meat, that was just like hanging out. It gets prettier
Yeah. Yeah.
as you as it evolves. And then having, all these tubes. I think I had 6 tubes in different parts of my body coming out, and it's one of these things, I think, where if it's traumatic enough, you have to revisit it periodically, because you kind of get it at certain levels as you're, as with like the Hope Beyond the Mountain painting, where I had to get to a certain level to see it. I think you build up your resources, your strength in different areas, emotional strength, and then you're able to revisit these things at different levels at different times. But what's funny is that, and cool, is that when I look at them, I do feel a peaceful feeling
Mm.
too. Not just It's not just like, oh, I don't want to look at that. It's actually comforting to look at it, because, oh, this is this real thing that I experienced, and no one knew what that this was like, and now I can look at this and see it reflected back to me. And yeah, that's really, there's some truth there, and the truth feels calming to me.
Yeah. I think that's one of the real, for me, one of the surprising things about getting older is you think you've gone through the experiences and you think that you have dealt with them, but later you think about them in a different way and you're processing them in an entirely different way all over again. And
Yeah.
the complex PTSD that we have from all of these medical touch points that we're having our whole lives, they hit a little bit differently after you've had some time to reflect. I wonder if you're recreating them, if they would look different, 10 years later as you've thought about it some more.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Good point. I think they would. And and even when I look at them, they evolve in my understanding of what they're saying.
Mm.
There's a sort of an ongoing conversation with them.
Coming up, Daniel tells us how art helps us better understand one another. So we were planning this episode, so some inside baseball. We actually do a little bit of planning. um, and you told me that your art has helped people around you better understand what you're experiencing, and you've described some of that. But I'm wondering if there was any particular piece that was particularly helpful in explaining what you were feeling.
I asked because the main person, was again my wife,
Mm.
Anna, and I mean, it spread from there. When I say the main person, she was the first and only person I showed my work to. And then eventually I showed it to, a smaller circle, and then, you know, put it out in the public. But yeah, the one that comes to mind for that sticks out, there's been a lot of them, but the one that sticks out is Tied Up at the Hospital. When I was 5 years old and I was diagnosed, but I was taken into a room without my parents, and they tried to put a tube in me,
Mm-hmm.
and I started fighting them off.
Yeah.
And instead of, explaining or talking to my parents or whatever, they actually restrained me and they tied me up. So many years later, it still impacts me. It became so central to my experience of life. And I had tried to describe this so many times. I told her about it. We'd been together 10 years when I painted that. And she'd heard about it. She knew, because I'd refer to it often because I'd have uh, flashbacks or reactions that related to it. And she had heard about it so many times, but when I finally painted it, she was like, "Oh, wow, now I get it." It's like I had no idea what, now I see what you're talking about. We should say for people who are just listening, um, it's a figure on a blue background, and the hands are spread apart, and not necessarily consciously or intentionally. It's kind of like a crucifixion type of figure,
Yeah.
and then there's a part to the side where there's like this yellow area, and there's tears all encapsulated in that, and the yellow is like leaving the body and going there, and that was meant to represent the emotion leaving my body and dissociating into this little floating figure that contains the tears, the all the feelings that came up for that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't know what piece you were going to choose, and this one really speaks to me because I didn't have the same experience as you, but similar enough that this is what it feels like. This is what it feels like to be restrained prior to a procedure and be awake while they're doing it. It's not great. So,
Yeah.
but this is something that we can, that you've created to explain the experience. And, we're not the only two people that have experienced this. So I love that it's in the world so that we can help other people understand what that feels like.
Yeah, and we actually out here in Santa Monica, I helped put together an IBD art show. It was all artists who had IBD and made work about IBD. And during that show, that piece was in it. One of our panelists, Morgan Check, who I wish I could remember,
Yes.
big NP. Do you remember her
Yes.
Instagram?
I will definitely put it in the show notes because
Uh,
she's
yeah,
amazing. Yes.
yeah, she's great. And she was telling, we were doing a panel, and the panelist asked, was there any piece that, stood out to you? And she chose that one. And, I thought it was a thing like, oh, it's the 70s, because this was
Yes.
1975. And you think, oh, just didn't know any better and this and that. And you're telling me about the 80s, and Morgan it had just happened to her like a year prior
Oh my gosh.
to this panel discussion, and it happened twice. And it's like,
Yeah.
do not, if you're a healthcare practitioner, please do not do anything but that.
Yeah.
It's like we've got it's not just a 5 minute. It's not like, you're trying to save a few minutes to get the procedure done,
Yes. Yes.
but to us, it's a lifetime. It's been 50 years now of trauma for me,
Mm-hmm.
and it changed the course of my life.
Yeah.
And I've done a lot of work on it too, and it's still had this huge impact. So yeah, it's a shame that it's still happening, but I'm glad it's out there for people who've experienced it and can relate to it at least.
Yeah. And it's difficult to uncover it and to talk about it. I've not talked about my experience of having that happen Really, probably beyond anybody but my husband, truthfully. So, because I didn't think it was a common experience. So, it's interesting and deeply upsetting that this kind of thing is still happening. And as you pointed out, it could be out of expedience, but it has obviously profound effects on those of us to whom it has happened, and it's something that I'm glad we're talking about it, because there are healthcare providers that do listen to this show, and so that they can understand that that's not it's not great, and it's something that too many of us have experienced.
And even just if I can say about what you just said, as far as not thinking it happened to anyone else,
Yeah,
or that it was a rare occurrence. That's part of this too, that's
yeah,
a big part of whether it's making art about it, whether it's your show, which you're talking about these things on a regular basis. It's like helping people know that they're not alone. I like to say that if my work, if I do it right, then someone can look at it and say, oh, okay, there's proof that I'm not alone.
yeah,
And that goes so far, because especially in this day and age where it's like we're so compartmentalized. I always think of like apartments where all these people, each one, they're probably in some kind of pain, but they're not connecting and they're right next to each other. That's why connecting the cure is called connecting the cure, right? Connection is,
absolutely.
it's critical.
It's critical. Daniel, everyone has had at least one moment where things didn't go as planned and they learned something that they'll never forget. Can you tell me about something that you learned the hard way?
I think I was not facing down certain feelings that I thought, with all this work, really, it's like I was afraid to go near it in a way. There were so many things that I just, didn't deal with head on, or didn't really get into the meat of, because I was
Yeah,
scared, And, to some degree, I have compassion for myself, because, these are very difficult things. But finally facing them down, and going through the feelings, even if I haven't processed everything yet, going through what I was able to access has been like hugely rewarding, I would say. I think the avoidance of feelings is one of the most destructive forces in our world,
yeah,
because they're there. And, we were talking in our pre-meeting, I think, about the body keeps the score, maybe. I
yes,
think we were.
yeah,
So it's either we're going to channel it out, or it's going to come out in an unhealthy way. And one of the big ones for me, and it's partially influenced by what I talked about earlier, tied up at the hospital, and there are other factors, some cultural, some family, some all sorts of things. I wasn't able to cry, for a long time. And we're always like, apologizing for emotion.
yes,
Uh, and I think that's just so destructive. And there's this painting called Here Comes the Flood. And there's two figures in there. I mean, there's the sort of anthropomorphized tsunami like wave in a stormy atmosphere. But there's two main figures in yellow or gold, orange. um, One is running away from the wave,
mm-hmm.
and that relates to me feeling like if I let myself cry, it was going to drown me.
Mm.
And there's another figure that's kind of in a more meditative sort of pose, and right in the center of the wave, and that figure is more at peace.
Yeah,
And it reminds me of I was having night terrors for a long time, where I'd wake up in the middle of the night, gasping for breath, and then be in a panic, kind of panicky feeling because of PTSD. I remember this one moment where one of these times I just decided I couldn't go back to sleep. I was, groggy, all that. I was tired. My heart's pounding. And I just decided, like, kind of like, let the wave overtake me. And I saw the image of the wave covering me and then me still being there,
Yeah.
covered in water, soaked, but right there, strong, standing straight. And the water had subsided. And that, this painting reminds me of that. And that's sort of the one of the things, creating space to feel your feelings uh, as soon as you are able, and with some kind of safety nets. You definitely need some safety nets, especially with severe trauma. But so that could be a therapist or friends, or you need to sort of judge for yourself. And but yeah, that's something, the earlier, I wish I'd done that earlier. And at the same time, I could look at my life and say, well, I've been moving toward that, and sometimes that's the best you can do.
Right. And having that self compassion to understand that your timeline doesn't look like anybody else's, or, it's your unique timeline, and you came to it when you needed to, and you met people along the way who, gave you little nudges here and there to get you there.
Yeah. And that's like the importance of just a little bit of compassion to your fellow human beings too,
Mm,
or a smile or something that helps. The nudge. That's what made me think of that.
yeah.
Nudging people. Yeah.
Nudging people. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to nudge you to tell me something that really has nothing to do with what we've just been talking. Well, maybe a little bit about what we've been talking about. I want to ask you more about ballroom dance. The husband and I
Uh,
did some ballroom dancing when we were younger, before I got pregnant with my first child. And talk about intimidating. That was something that I never thought that I would do, but we enjoyed it immensely. What was your experience with it like?
yeah, similar. I didn't think I'd find myself in that position, but I had a blast. I would improvise a lot. So I'd do the very structured stuff,
Yeah.
and then I'd improvise. They'd have like one night a week where they'd do like a dance party or
Yeah.
whatever, where everyone.
Yep. We had that too. Yep.
Yeah, and so I would improvise, and then I'd see all some of the people getting all mad at me, because I'd do the formal thing for a little bit, and then I'd just usually try to make the person I was having fun, and I was trying to make the person I was dancing with laugh. And
Yeah.
definitely they, my partners enjoyed it, and not everyone enjoyed it. But it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
It kind of doesn't surprise me to learn that you liked to improvise. um, I used to get in trouble, and uh, this will not surprise anyone that knows me well, but I used to get in trouble because I had trouble following. I was always trying to lead. So when I was dancing with my husband, well, he would get annoyed with me too, but he would deal with it much better. But when I was dancing with one of the instructors, they would really just like let me have it, and that I needed to learn to follow, and that I needed to learn to accept what my partner was leading me to do, even if it wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do. And that wasn't easy. I don't think I ever quite got there. But at least we can go to a wedding and dance passively to some ballroom. And sometimes I will hear music and I will automatically start thinking to myself, that's a cha-cha, that's a foxtrot, that's
Mm.
that's a whatever.
Uh-huh.
I'll
Uh-huh.
categorize them and I'll start thinking about how to move. My absolute favorite always though was the swing. That was just the most fun.
Oh, yeah.
So, Daniel, you have so much going on. You have so many irons in the fire. You have so much more artwork that we couldn't get to all of it today, but I really want people to see it. So, can you tell me where people can connect with you online or maybe even in the real world?
Yeah, so best place is probably my website, danielleighton.com, which has links to everything. And the social media that I'm most frequently posting to is Instagram.
Mhm.
So at Daniel Leighton Art on Instagram. I'm on other ones too. I started with Substack, so that's another good place to find me.
Oh, great.
But mostly my website and Instagram, I'd say.
Perfect. I'll put all that information in the show notes and on my website so people can find you. And Daniel, thank you so much for talking with me and for going through some of these experiences, which are really difficult, but have informed your art so well. And I think I really do want other people to see your artwork because it does really convey the emotions and the feelings of living with all these complex feelings and what we go through with IBD. And I think it's a great way that somebody can point to a painting and say, you know what, that experience that I had, this is what it felt like. So thank you so much for all of your work and for speaking with me today and for all of the work that you did in preparation for this episode. I really do appreciate you.
Thank you. And likewise, uh, your show is tremendous. And as I told you pre-show, your preparation is fantastic, the best I've seen. And it's just a pleasure getting to know you. Stacey's told me about you, and I've seen you online and stuff, but just like getting to interact with you directly is really a pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much. Hey, super listener. Check the show notes to find links and information about the topics discussed in this episode. Plus, get a written transcript and much more on my website, aboutibd.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with someone or leaving a rating in your podcast app. Reviews and ratings help me grow the show and bring you more great content. This episode was sponsored by Connecting to Cure, and I'm so grateful for their support. Thanks for listening, and remember, until next time, I want you to know more about IBD. About IBD is a production of Mal and Tal Enterprises. It is edited, written, produced, and directed by me, Amber Tresca. Mix and sound design is by Max Cooney. Theme music is from Cooney Studio.